Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Leininger, and I am the Managing Director here at Old Line Government Affairs, and we welcome you to another installment of Online with Old Line. For this edition of Online with Old Line, we are thrilled to introduce to you Senator Brian Feldman, representing District 15 in Montgomery County in Maryland. Brian has been a longtime friend. I showed up in Annapolis, I think in the special session of 2004, and Senator Feldman has been served in the House of Delegates starting in 2003, and then has been in the State Senate on the Senate Finance Committee since 2013, and has been Vice Chair of the Senate Finance Committee for, I guess, a couple of years now. And we really appreciate you taking the time. And maybe just to kick things off, you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the district you represent.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brett. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, so I'm a sort of a born and raised Pittsburgh boy. I don't like to talk about that very much in the Maryland General Assembly, but that's where my roots are, in the city of Pittsburgh. And then I was drawn to the DC area because I was a political junkie, like a lot of folks that I serve with. And I moved to DC for a job. I spent a lot of years before I was elected as a Department of Justice lawyer. I was a DOJ litigator. I traveled around the country representing the United States of America in court.
Awesome.
On federal tax cases, to be specific, some pretty high profile cases, and can talk about some of them. But I did that for quite a long time. And I actually met my wife there as well. She was a Justice Department lawyer, and I met in the DOJ cafeteria. I met her. Not the most romantic story, but ended up marrying another DOJ lawyer. And then we moved to the burbs. And that's how I found myself in Montgomery County. And so that's the long and the short of it is Pittsburgh to DC to Montgomery County, Maryland. And so after doing many years, long distance litigation, and I had little kids, I just wanted to do something different. Than most of my cases, by the way, were in the West. So I was responsible for certain kind of cases in Nevada, Arizona, California. And after doing that for a lot of years with little kids at home, I wanted something different. And I always sort of fancied the possibility of running for political office. And a seat opened up in the Maryland House of Delegates, an open seat, which doesn't happen that often. And I had never run for office before, and I wanted to make some changes in my lawyer world and do something bold. And I did something crazy. I ran for the Maryland House of Delegates, and it worked out. And yes, so I got elected in District 15, which is a pretty interesting district. Quite candidly, it is a huge district. It's by far the largest geographically largest district in Montgomery County. So it goes from sort of from the south, the Potomac area, a little bit of Bethesda and Rockville, all the way to the Frederick County border. Along the Potomac River, my district is across the river from Virginia. So I get to see, literally can see Virginia. But it's diverse politically. I mean, for example, if you represent the River Road Potomac crowd, pretty wealthy sort of constituent base, all the way to Poolesville, which is a farming ag area. So I represent the Poolesville farmers and the billionaires on River Road. And that includes the Ag Reserve of Montgomery, the 90,000 acre Ag Reserve and that whole, and then it goes all the way through half of Germantown, all the way to Clarksburg. So it's a vast district, very diverse politically. It has the largest Asian population of any Senate district in the state of Maryland, which is kind of interesting. And politically, it's pretty moderate. Relative, everybody thinks of Montgomery County now, as this deep blue liberal bastion. The reality is my district's not so much. Larry Hogan, just to give you some context, actually carried my Senate district in the last election, 2018, by double digits.
Wow.
So it's not Tacoma Park. It's not, it's politically a little more moderate. And so, that gives you a little flavor that it's an interesting district to represent, very diverse politically, ethnically, demographically. And so, yeah, I've split my time between the House of Delegates and now the Senate. And as you mentioned, this term for the last 3 years, I've served as the vice chair of our Senate Finance Committee, which I think is the best committee in the entire General Assembly. It's got the broadest subject matter jurisdiction. It's got energy policy, healthcare policy, which Brett, you are very involved with, but also deals with all the labor issues, economic development issues, all of those in one committee. It's basically two of the committees from the House Economic Matters Committee, which is where I served the entire time in the House of Delegates, and the HDO committee, the health committee over there. So it's basically one committee in the Senate that has the subject matter jurisdiction of two committees over in the House. So it's been an interesting ride, and that's kind of in a nutshell. There's nothing more to say about myself, really.
No, that's excellent. Really appreciate the context. I think that is often overlooked. People put counties in buckets, but there are districts that are very different, and yours has to be the most diverse of all the districts within Montgomery County, and that really your description of it really speaks to that diversity there.
Yeah, just to share how things have shifted, Brett. When I first got elected, 3 of the 4 seats in District 15 were actually Republican. The senator was a woman, Jean Rosser. The 2 of the delegates were Jean Cryer, who some people may remember, and Guy Rich LeVay. The only Democrat of the 4 was Mark Shriver, who then Mark Kennedy Shriver, from the Kennedy family, and he ran for Congress, and that's the seat that I basically got elected to. I got elected to the Kennedy seat. I like to say that. It makes me. Mark was son of Sergeant Shriver and Eunice Shriver, and his uncle was the former president of the United States and all that. So if I would ever run into Senator Ted Kennedy, I will always make the point that I took his nephew's seat and that I represented his sister Eunice. She lived in District 15, and now again, Montgomery County is elected representatives are all Democrat, but it was not the case that first time I ran. And even after that, the top vote getter in that first election was actually Jean Cryer, the Republican, in the House race. And that was only in 06. So it's not like generations ago. People think of 2006 as like a million years ago. It's this century. I mean, it's 2006. It was, 15 years ago. It's hard to believe I've been in for that long, but that's how things have shifted just from 2006 to now in my district, when again, from 3 or 4 seats being held by Republicans. And that year it was Rob Gargiola and Kathleen Dumais and I all got elected, and it turned things.
Wow.
So
I didn't realize it was that much of a dramatic shift in that recent time ago. That's excellent. That's great. So you mentioned all of your jurisdiction, Senate Finance, and obviously in economic matters from your days in the House, going from energy to healthcare to insurance to labor, as you said. What would you say has been the biggest accomplishment in your tenure in the legislature, either in the House or the Senate, or both?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, because that's particularly, I would say the last 3-4 years I've had some pretty big bills. I would say landmark bills. Maybe I could reel off a couple in different.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Energy space. I was the sponsor, and you've been working on of the Clean Energy Jobs Act in 2019, which takes us to 50% renewable energy by 2030. I think it's a significant, bill in the energy space. In healthcare, I chair a commission with Delegate Jocelyn Panu-Melnick called the Health Insurance Coverage Protection Commission, and we've made some great strides on a bipartisan basis, I would say, with Governor Hogan, in reducing our individual market premiums the last few years. And so I think that we've actually reduced those premiums by 31% in the last 3 years. Our uninsurance rate has come down, from 12% to 6%. Last year, I actually had a bill that codified into Maryland law all the consumer protections of the Affordable Care Act, because we don't know right now whether the Supreme Court's going to throw out the ACA, but it won't matter in Maryland in terms of if you want protections for pre-existing conditions or keeping your kids on until 26. So we put that into Maryland law in a bill that I sponsored last year. I think that is, long lasting. That'll
Absolutely.
Be, in terms of some legacy bills, I think that's one. Another one in transportation, I collaborated with Mark Corman a couple of years ago. For the first time in 40 years, we now have a dedicated funding stream for our DC Metro system. We're the only system in the nation that had a system, a transit subway system, the size of the DC Metro that had no dedicated funding stream. And in 2018, we passed the Metro Funding Act, and I was the Senate sponsor of that. Really had dramatic implications for the DC Metro system. We had, since 1967, when it was created, had never had a debt. Every year, Metro would have to come to DC, Virginia, and Maryland and beg for money. And we had to do that in collaboration with DC and Virginia. And one of the other things I do when outside the legislature, I'm on the COG board of directors, the Metro Washington Council board of directors. And we had that, anytime you make a change to the Metro system, Maryland, DC, and Virginia all have to pass the same bill.
Wow.
So it was very complicated. We had to work with our colleagues in Richmond, the DC City Council, and the Maryland Legislature, and the governor. And Delegate Corman and I managed to put that together. And now, as a result of that, you can do some long-term planning, which has been a huge problem for our metro system. So that, I would say that was a huge one. The only other one that I just have to mention is I was the sponsor of something called the ABLE Act. And what that is we've got young kids who have severe medical challenges. These are not kids that are going to college necessarily. And we've always had the 529 college savings plan. You can save for your kid's future for college on a tax deferred basis. But for families that have kids with autism or whatever, the ability to save and put into an account and save for their future was very limited. And Congress enabled the states to create a very similar program, tax deferred account, to save for those kids' future. And I was the sponsor of that bill. And even to this day, I have parents who come to me and they were like, that was the best thing that the General Assembly ever did, that I can now save for my kids' future, whatever needs they may have when I'm gone. And you can accumulate things for their education, whatever, transportation, and a whole range of. So those are like 3 or 4 things that I'm really, just in the last few years, I've been really proud of. Big bills that'll survive long past when I'm no longer in the General Assembly. So thank you for that.
Sure. Well, I think it's awesome. Obviously we're dealing with big industries, and those are very important, weighty, meaty policy issues. And we've always appreciated your ability to get into the weeds on these issues, but also just hearing about the last 2 that you mentioned. I mean, those are things that you've got to be really proud of, just on a personal level, to have that kind of impact.
Yeah, no, it really, again, my focus the last few years have been in the healthcare, health insurance, and energy space. But, these other bills that I had to mention, because they really were significant. And I really think like landmark bills for our state, and, really impacting people's lives in an enduring way.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really awesome. So to that extent, thinking about what you've done in the past, what do you think about in the upcoming session and to the future? What would you like to see? What's hot on your list of issues to tackle?
Well, I'll come back to my 2 sort of staple issues. I think on the clean energy side, I think just this past week, the Biden administration held a summit on energy policy and clean energy. Mm-hmm. And is working on potentially a huge clean energy plan. And I have said this in the past, and I'll say it again. I think the states that can really put in place an infrastructure that's receptive and forward thinking and leading on the clean energy space will be the states that get all those federal dollars that I think are coming down the pipeline from the feds. We've seen that in the past. It's the states that can put the things in place are going to be the states that get the money. And if you're lagging, you're not going to see the federal money. And so I think there's still a lot. We did some stuff this year, even with the pandemic. We had bills dealing with clean energy and our renewable energy portfolio standard, including bills that Brett, you worked on. I think that's one category. I think we're still going to see some action. The other is, again, I'll come back to healthcare. We did some things in the healthcare space, innovative, first in the nation, that we went from 12% to 6% uninsured the last several years.
Huge.
Brought our premiums down, but I think there's a whole bunch of stuff still that I think we can do, borrowing from what other states are trying. So we've been creative, we've been innovative, but I don't think we should stop. I think we shouldn't rest on our laurels. And that's where this commission that I talked about, that I share with Delegate Pena-Melnick, we're going to have hearings during the interim. And the last few years, that's been the place where we've had briefings, hearings, and have vetted some creative ideas. And then we would come to the General Assembly, hopefully working, with folks like yourself. I know you represent Kaiser, who's a member of the commission, by the way. They were represented on the commission, and try to have it worked out so that we get to session. These bills can kind of fly through. So I think there's a lot of upside potential for Maryland in clean energy economically. I mean, the climate stuff's one thing, but boy, job creation is really what we want. Is in-state Maryland jobs in that space, and everybody benefits from lower healthcare costs.
Absolutely.
Community benefits. And this year we saw with, the recession, pandemic induced, a lot of folks lose their health insurance if they lose their job. Yeah. And we really found that if you can bring those premiums down, it really helps that category of folks who are at very high risk of losing their health insurance after they also lost their jobs. About 25% of people who lost their jobs also lost their health insurance.
Wow.
And so I think those are some areas that I think, again, there's a lot more we can do. And those are issues that are in the Finance Committee. And those are issues that you work on.
Yeah.
Also represent your client base. And you do a great job. I'm going to give you a shout out.
Appreciate that.
A broad range. I was talking about my constituent base is broad. You've got a very broad portfolio of clients. A lot of them are, have business in the Finance Committee, but you do a good job. And, you'll be part of all these topics that I just mentioned, no doubt.
Yeah, we look forward to that. And we've always very much appreciated the open door policy, or the virtual open door policy that we experienced last session. Hopefully we can get back to some normalcy coming up next session.
Yeah, well, the personal touch, I mean, I never realized how important the personal contact, can be and is in the legislative process, but not having folks be able to come to my office, help frame the issues. We're a part-time legislature. We don't have the staff of the United States Congress.
Right.
A lot of the information we get is, from folks in government relations. Yeah. And so it's really hugely important. And we didn't have that this year, which was really handicapped us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's why, one of the reasons why we were out there on Lawyers Mall as much as we possibly could. I couldn't stand sitting behind the desk for that long anyway, but I got a lot of work done throughout the session.
Oh, I saw you a lot. You were camped out there, so we had to get through the gauntlet of you, Brett, before we could make our way over to the Senate chamber. So, but it was good. I think it was good. And in fact, we were able to kind of keep sort of up to speed on what was happening in the House and the Senate. And you had some intel, particularly the other chamber, that I wasn't even privy to. And I could tell you a little bit about what was happening. Yeah. The personal connection's really, really important. And again, it was never more obvious than this past session.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll never have to go through again anything like that.
I hope so. So I guess to wrap things off, I've known you for 17 years, if you can believe it. What's one unique thing or a fun fact about yourself that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, so when I was in college, I worked on the Wildwood, New Jersey boardwalk. And so they gave me a microphone. So I had two jobs, Brett. My first job was as a bingo caller on the boardwalk, and they would bring busloads of people down from Philadelphia, average age 80 to 85, and they would play bingo. Down there it was actually called Skillo, and so I was the bingo caller for two of those summers on the boardwalk. And one time it was very stressful because that was the make or break, whether the bus crowd had a good weekend in Wildwood or not depended on my call. So I do remember one case where a woman actually took something. She was so upset that I had called like 065. She threw like a shoe at me and said that I just, had it out for her or whatever. But that was an interesting period of my life on the boardwalk. And then another one was I was on the pier. They gave me I worked at a game, one of the big games on the boardwalk, and you had to throw these little 2-liter bottle, and you'd have to throw a ring, and they would have to. It was the hardest game on the boardwalk to win, but it had the biggest, most impressive. If you did win, you got these massive white stuffed polar bears, and fact is, it was almost impossible to win them. But the fact is, they gave me tremendous latitude to bring in the business. So they gave me a microphone. So the transition from there to trial lawyer to being a state senator wasn't that, I had the mic, and I didn't. And they asked me to like sing songs, anything to get attention to myself. So it was a good kind of foundation for what I later did in life was my boardwalk time with a microphone with tens of thousands of people walking along the boardwalk, having to listen to me yap. So I did that literally my whole entire college career. I spent the summers at the Jersey Shore, and that's a little tidbit. I'm not sure if I've shared that with many people in Annapolis, but
I haven't heard that. That's great.
And the only other thing I would say that people do know is, as a trial lawyer at the Justice Department, in one of my highest profile cases was I was, and I think, Brett, you've heard this, I was the lead counsel for the United States of America on whether prostitutes working on brothels, in the legal brothels in Nevada, were independent contractors, employees, for tax purposes. And I was on the front page of Las Vegas newspapers and Reno newspapers. There were tens of millions of dollars that rested on that one issue. I had to do jury trials in Nevada on that topic, and I had to take depositions for like 6 months of women who worked in that industry to find out how they operated, and how much. So that is a later story I love to tell about myself that people want to know more about those trials and how they went, and juries in Nevada and that industry. So those are a couple little tidbits.
That's great. It's fascinating. As long as I've known you, I've not heard those stories. So that's really great. Well, Senator, we really thank you for taking the time to be with us, and look forward to more opportunities to work with you through the interim. We'll have a lot of issues as per normal, and really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us.
Great to be with you, Brett. Thanks for the invite. Thank you.
And thanks to our audience. For more conversations with legislators and more online with Old Line, please visit oldlinelobbying.com. And thanks again, Senator. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.